give Jim an introduction. So Jim, your second time, thank you very much for coming back to us. Jim Safka is the turnaround CEO at Match. So from 2004 to 2007, Jim was the CEO of Match and actually came on board after Match had had 7 flat quarters and very effectively turned them around. Great and stunning success. He's formerly was the VP at AVP at AT&T and a VP at E-Trade. After Match, he was the CEO of Ask.com and basically taking on Google, no less. So I have a few questions for you, Jim. Thank you very much for coming along to us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'm excited to be here and excited for everybody that's joined this event. It's an impressive roster, and I'm honored to be here.
Great. Well, we love having you here, and you're in amongst your own with us. So good.
These are my people.
Yes, exactly. Right. So we're going to do things a bit differently this time. Last time it was kind of a Q&A backwards and forwards. I thought we'd mix it up a bit this time. We actually pulled some news, some interesting news. Even last week has been quite a hot news week. And I've pulled some news. So starting with Axios, let me just give you a quick overview of this. So Axios just ran some news about singles being more inclined to go out on events and less inclined to swipe. So events are up, swiping's out. Do you really buy that?
I do, actually. I do. And I think the reason why I buy it is that if you think about swiping today, anybody who's used one of the apps, and I stay on top of these. I'm not a active participant in the as a customer, but I stay abreast of how they're working. And I've got many friends who use these things every day. And the truth is that swiping for most people is not particularly effective. You don't get enough matches, and then there's big issues in authenticity and truth in advertising, if you will. And so you do it for long enough. At some point, it's intoxicating, all the dopamine hits that you get along the way, but ultimately it doesn't deliver results for so many people. So I think the reason what the survey turns out the way it does is that people are desperate for some kind of human connection. They want to go from a swipe to actually meeting somebody. And so events are a way to cut right to the chase. So I think events are fascinating. It's one word that describes potentially a lot of different forms and opportunities. So, I think when we talk about events, we got to really break it down into what kinds of events, because they can be small, they can be large, and different people are more comfortable in one environment versus another. And very compelling people. Some are very introverted, some are very extroverted. But I think there's an opportunity for even the introverted folks to find great success at events if they're structured the right way.
And what did you do with events? I seem to remember there was Chris Terrell, VP New Initiatives in your tenure, and he took a special interest in events. And it was some period after that, I think Mandy took an interest in Match Live. I'm not sure if she started that up, or was that within your tenure? I think you inspired it.
Yeah.
There was a movement towards events in your tenure, I remember.
Yeah. Well, we did have events when I started, and then it's something that while I was leading the company, we essentially put it on ice. The events that we were doing, well, here's the first thing that I discovered. It's, I spent the first, month or 90 days in the company just listening and seeing how things operate, business as usual. And one of the things I discovered was that, Match at its core was a technology company. And so, we have, engineers and QA folks, product managers, thinking about what the digital experience is. And so to be world-class in technology is very different core competency than being world-class at producing events and thoughtful events and ones that work, that deliver results. And I found that the events that we were producing, they were just kind of bromidic. They were I call it junior varsity kinds of events. The scale and the production quality was tremendous, but the overall experience wasn't consistent with the brand that we wanted to create. So I'm of the mindset that you do something and you do it well, or you don't do it at all. There's no in between. And at Match at the time, it was very in between. One of the things that I discovered is that in terms of the senior leadership team and just the company's focus, and you can only do so many things so well. The events were a small part of the P&L, and a small number of customers that could actually be impacted by the events, but it took a great deal of everybody's time in trying to figure out how to do them and do them successfully. And so, ultimately the scale of the opportunity, it didn't feel like it was there. I felt like we were doing a half-assed job of producing them. So I've always been intrigued by them, and I think about them, a little bit differently these days than I did when I was there. I wanted to identify things that we should stop doing, and I was pretty draconian about that, and then find some things that work where we could really step on the gas. And events was one of the things that ended up essentially on the chopping block. But I think that events today, there's so many different kind of events to think about doing, and I think that what's most interesting to me are the folks that are, don't necessarily enjoy events, going to weddings, going to, where you have to have all this idle chatter with people that you don't know. It's very uncomfortable for a lot of people. How can you create events that make people, a little more comfortable in their own skin, where they can really be themselves? And I think there's probably ways to do this if we were to get really creative. And I think that, in terms of swiping versus events, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. I think it'd be really interesting to consider integrating the two approaches. If there's going to be a large number of folks at an event, there may be swiping in advance to help curate the smaller groups that you might interact with, or the individual one-on-ones that you might do if it turns into something of a speed dating. But that's another way to make it kind of fun and interactive. I think you can, in some cases, if you're really creative, get the best of both worlds. I think that I do have a lot of heart for events, but really, truly, if they're going to be done well and they're going to be done at scale, a lot of it can't be something you do on the side. It has to be something primary that you execute extremely well. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me the survey, though. It's at some point, the whole point is that you might meet somebody who you would otherwise never meet. And if you're not getting the results from swiping, then events, it's a guarantee you're going to meet folks.
And people just want to get out the house as well, just go into a singles event.
Yeah, it's a forcing mechanism. Right, right.
Right. So next news item here, we've got Hinge released their date report last week, which stands for Data Advice Trends Expertise. They surveyed 14,000 people. That's a pretty good survey, isn't it? It seems we are sitting on a potential treasure trove of surveyable users, right? I mean, why do you think we're not seeing more of these kinds of studies, for one thing? And what's the best way of doing these kinds of studies?
Well, I think that these surveys do get published. Match publishes some, as you know, and then this one as well. It's a formidable number of people that participate in them. So, as I looked at the results of it, directionally, it all made sense. But in terms of how you take the results of the surveys and make it actionable, it's less clear. What do you do with this? And the other thing, the challenge with surveys, I've got a couple of issues or challenges with them. One is that I don't believe what people say. I believe what they do. And so when that's one aspect. The other aspect is there are people who relish taking surveys and enjoy it because somebody's listening to what they have to say. And then there's other people that have no time for it. So you have some real bias in terms of the respondents, and do they represent the whole audience, or are they just a certain breed of person that likes contributing to surveys and whatnot. So both those aspects, I think, end up delivering some imprecise data that could be dangerous to interpret too literally. But in terms of the best way to do surveys, surveying the users, what they do behaviorally, as opposed to asking them what they think of something. I believe what people do much more than what they say. But to the extent that you're getting data via survey, I think it's really interesting to any interaction that you have with a customer, whether it's online or in person or over the phone in a chat, to to have a list of questions that you rotate through, that it's 1 or 2 questions in a given moment, and then ultimately you compile back all the data. So it's not, I'm taking a survey on this, because a lot of times people will, there's that bias. They don't tell you what they actually do or how they really feel. It's more aspirational. This is what I would like it to be. And so, I think I like them. It's one data point that's useful, but it's got to be, I think, as authentic as it could possibly be. And so there's a lot of issues. I mean, I personally, when I look at the surveys, I look at that Hinge survey or any of the ones that we would do at Match. I would look at them and go, yeah, it sounds directionally right. And what's next? Ultimately it didn't give me. I've never seen in a survey where I've been so surprised and then taken action and it's changed the course of the business.
Mm-hmm.
That just never happened for me.
Yeah, I guess that's where, looking over someone's shoulder and seeing how they're actually interacting with the service really gives you a bit more truth and getting their thoughts in the moment. Yeah,
that's true. In fact, I grew up in the technology world at Intuit, the company that made the Quicken products and TurboTax and whatnot. And the founder of the company, Scott Cook, was a genius when it would come to customer insight and how do you get the most useful insight. And one of the programs that they started and were a real innovator in was the beta testing program, where it was Follow Me Home. And back in the day, it was you had a DVD or a disc that you'd put in, install the software and whatnot. But this continued even after everything went fully online. But essentially, a product manager or somebody from the product team would go to the home of the person who's the beta tester and watch them from the installation of the software to whatever the tasks were that to get started on it. They would just watch and they'd ask the beta tester to talk out loud as you're going through the process, in terms of things you understand and don't understand. And so that uncovered all kinds of insights in terms of where there's friction in the product, what moments of that are joyful, where the frustration is. That Follow Me Home testing, where you just observe, I think is really genius. And that's where you can take a lot of the bias out, because you're watching the raw behavioral opportunity there. And we at Intuit, we did that. It wasn't like we just did 5 or 7 of these. We would do have 100 beta testers for any new product release, and we do multiple iterations as the product was developed. And I attribute that kind of testing in large part to why Intuit was really pretty famous for creating a joyful customer experience with products that are, they're not the sexiest products in the world, but they solve a problem, they serve a purpose.
Just a note to our audience: if you are doing this kind of testing or any kind of testing that you'd like to talk about, please put it in the chat. We'd love to read what you're doing, the extent of your testing. So the next item I've got here is last Forbes article stated an interesting idea, and they basically perhaps dating apps could be a company benefit for their single workers. I found that really thought-provoking. It's like, okay, that's interesting. So this could be something that you go work for some big company, you go work for, I don't know, GM, and as part of your benefit package, you get a free membership to a certain single dating app. It's like, this kind of on this same sort of thinking. Does dating become some kind of utility? I wonder. What do you think about this entire concept then?
I read this piece, and when I first read it, I thought, that's ridiculous, totally outrageous. That doesn't make any sense. But that was only my first gut reaction, which isn't always right. The more I thought about it, the more I started to think it's genius. Like it's a really interesting idea. I mean, first of all, if you've ever worked, if you ever run a company and you've got a large group of employees, one of the things that is really frowned upon is, but very common are, people connecting with other people in the office for, and starting romantic relationships. It creates all kinds of challenges and issues and problems. But look, this is who you're spending most of your time with. It makes perfect sense that that's where you would find somebody that you want to spend the rest of your life with. But from a just a HR and legal perspective, it's fraught with challenges. So it's generally frowned upon. But what a genius solution on a couple of levels. First, it gets people, more focused on, outside candidates outside of your office. And I think that's helpful as opposed to people just, focusing on who they see every day. But companies want to support, positive and healthy mental frameworks, mental health in amongst employees. And there are many programs that companies are doing, some more innovative than others. But I like that companies are focused on mental health. And I mean, I think, Mark, you've seen more of this data than I have, but being in a relationship and all the benefits it delivers to you being a happy person that's well balanced, it's pretty extraordinary. And so, providing these kinds of solutions, I think never would have thought of it until I saw this article, and my initial reaction was that how silly. But yeah, after contemplating it more, it makes all the sense in the world to me. And you say, like, more like a public utility. I think that's really the goal here, right? Is to make the process of meeting and connecting with somebody maybe the most important thing in your life, to make that more normalized and natural. And so the more often it shows up in contexts like this, the more it starts to feel like a utility and just normal. And there, and so I love the idea. I can't wait to see who embraces it and implements it. By the way, it's really interesting. You wouldn't necessarily want, when you have several companies that are participating, that are local companies, and the search criteria wouldn't be people within your own company, but it would be a blend of everybody, that's there. You could populate a database of profiles really quickly. And I think it would be absolutely fascinating. I think there are, some companies that would have the initial instinct that I had, which is, no, we're not going to do something like that. But I think there will be some that are innovators. And I think that this would be embraced by the public and many people. It'd be fun. It'd be fun.
And
I hope somebody does this.
Tip of the hat to that brand. That, I mean, a large company, say Apple, chooses, okay, we've chosen this. Well, Apple, we're on the platform, so that would be a little dicey. But say a GM says, okay, we're going to run with this dating company. That's a real tip of the hat to that company, for a large corporation to do the due diligence on the apps and sign off with a particular program, and also bumps up their critical mass as well quite nicely to have those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there will be some innovators here, and bravo to them. And it really, it gets people focused on not the folks that are within the company as your highest potential dating pool, but look, the companies are tend to cluster around each other. So there's complementary companies that are nearby. Just brilliant. And I think that I'm not opposed to relationships that start within a company. It's only natural, but it's also, it's just not ideal. It's, in so many ways.
Yeah. So I've got the perfect question for you, the perfect news item. Given your history with Dr. Phil, ramping up, Dr. Phil, Jay Shetty is a very popular author, right? And a social media star, a former monk, I think. Match has teamed up with him, and this reminds me of something you spun up in the past. Perhaps you could talk to it. What do you think of this strategy, basically? Do you think this is still got legs?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant strategy, a really nice move on Match's part. It's something that served a real purpose when I was at Match, and whereas Dr. Phil is a super polarizing guy, people either love him or hate him, but he was very mainstream, so he helped take any remaining stigma out of the category. He made it feel okay, natural, and normal. He was we can go into a lot about where he really worked and where there were challenges, but Jay Shetty is, and he's so likable. I think for both men and women and everything in between, he's aspirational. And he talks about authenticity and purpose and shared values and starting there so I think that his approach in terms of the self-discovery. And then, before, when Dan was talking about, how do you search for something when you don't know exactly what you're searching for? I think Jay Shetty really helps people not figure that out completely and precisely, but directionally. in a very, very useful way. So I think it's a brilliant move. I applaud, what they're doing. My friend Barry Ryan has got a similar program, dating through curiosity, and getting at the same kinds of things, which is, our tagline with Dr. Phil was "Match will show you who, Dr. Phil will show you how." And I think that before you get to the match will show you who part, that process of self-discovery, before you can start to figure out what you're searching for, you done well better understand yourself a little bit better. And I think that's what Jay does a brilliant job of. That's what Phil helped us with. And, that's, again, what my friend Barry Ryan is creating with Dating Through Curiosity. I think it's going to be very successful. I'm fascinated to see the results. And I hope they go, deep with it and fully integrate it, into the product experience. I think it'll be super helpful for many people. Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that we've learned today is people do need help, don't they? I mean, that's and the key question is like, in what field do we draw this help in from? It's like we've got to look at the culture, kind of the brand, each of our brands. Like, who will we draw in? So what Barry's doing with Dating Through Curiosity, he's got a long heritage of helping people, raise their levels of curiosity in particular domains and contexts. So it's great to have his take on our industry.
Yeah, and I think that there was something that Dr. Phil, told me, and I think he talked about it in the product modules that we created, but he called it the 80% rule. And the 80% rule is like, if in your process of meeting folks, you've got your mental list of all the boxes that you want to check in terms of the perfect soulmate. And his feeling was, if you find somebody that 80% matches what you think you're looking for, is like, grab them and don't let them go, because that is gold. It's like you'll never get to 100%, but you can start to close that gap with somebody who's 80%, because you can work on those things, and you'll be able to close that gap. And versus trying to find somebody that's closer to 100%, you'll spend the rest of your life, and you'll probably die before you find that. So in the meantime, you will have missed out on all the benefits of being in a loving relationship. And so I think that was really good advice, and I think that Jay's got a similar message in terms of who you're looking for.
Do you remember eDiets, actually? Who took this model to the nth degree? Remember eDiets.com? All those years.
Of course, yeah.
They went nuts with it, didn't they? They had all their gurus. You could choose your guru. You go onto eDiets.com and decide who you wanted to subscribe, and get prescriptions from, essentially. And so you could choose your guru for particular kind of diets, and then it would just lay everything out for you. Very powerful model for a long while. They did quite well with that.
I think, I mean, so the Match approach, and the one I took as well at Match when I was there, was you find the guru with the biggest audience, and really lean in deep to leverage them. But I think you're right, though. I think what you're trying to get at is the self-discovery of who you are, and help you figure out what you're looking for. And then the other part is, when you actually do go out there and meet people, it's these are like potentially the most important job interviews of your life. And if you're going to be successful, you've got to do massive preparation, truly, and in terms of really understanding who you are, and figuring out how to become curious. I think that there was Scott Cook is the founder of Intuit, told me this way back in the day, and I'll never forget it. It was an important lesson learned, but he was referencing sales, and how do you know if you're a good salesperson or made a successful sale in a meeting? And he said, I've got a very simple rule, and it's that if you've done less than 50% of the talking, you have a high likelihood of success. If you've done more than 50% of the talking, you've totally screwed it up. You've totally screwed it up. I think that applies to people going out on a first date or a second date, or any interaction with any other human. A 50% rule: do less than 50% of the talking. What it requires you to do is to be curious, genuinely curious about other creatures and other things, and most people just aren't curious, or they feel like they're trying to sell themselves. They have to keep talking, and I think most people aren't great listeners, because we were talking about the AI. I think maybe we'll talk about that more, hopefully. But in terms of giving you ideas, topics to talk about, questions to ask, and a lot of it seems, well, we'll talk about that in a second. But the curiosity has to be authentic and genuine, not staged, for it to be real and effective. And I think it's an art form. It's an art form.
Hopefully not a lost one. Hopefully it's something that we can train in eventually.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
So AI. Let's move on to AI, shall we? The founder of Bumble was quoted as saying that they would use AI for coaching and support. There was some question of the ethics of this approach. The author of the article called out dehumanizing effects and making dating apps less authentic. This sounds deadly, of course. We have to be so careful with AI. Is this a game for just the larger companies, really? Is there a place in the market for the anti-AI dating app, perhaps? How would you thread the needle when it comes to getting AI strategy right with data?
Yeah. I mean, AI, it's powerful when you've got data and data that's accurate. So, the first thing is, what, the data set, and what does it include, and how precise is it? But for coaching and advice, look, I mean, AI, if you will, has been a part of the dating apps from even before I started in the industry, right? There's an algorithm that Match has, that determines on any given day, any given week, you get an email with, here's your top matches, right? Those top matches, it's not a random list of people in your area. There's a very sophisticated algorithm that's looking at many factors that delivers these candidates in your email, and it includes the criteria you set, the criteria someone else set, but it goes way beyond that. It incorporates all of your behavior on the site or the app, anything that Match has seen in this case. And it also takes into account, how responsive you are when somebody sends you a message, and vice versa. And because there's a big imbalance in terms of people that get bombarded, and then people that send out messages that don't get replies. And so, to keep the whole ecosystem working at its best, that algorithm was constantly improving. And this was, a long time ago. So, people call it AI now. But I think it was AI back then. And frankly, I'm getting pretty damn sick and tired of the cliche of AI. It's AI, and it's because it's, like I said, AI has existed, if you will, for decades, and it's not a new thing in that respect. But now, with some of the tools and capabilities that are being unlocked with the newest technology, there are some interesting areas where it can be applied and possibly useful. I think for me, primarily in the matching algorithms. But when you mentioned coaching and support, that I cringe at that. I think it's disgusting. Every once in a while you're interacting with a company, and it's impossible to reach a human when you're desperate to just reach a human. Maybe when you call the pharmacy or something, you have to go through the phone tree, or you go onto the site and there's a chat bot, it's powered by AI, but it's your worst nightmare, because you're not interacting with a human, and that this thing isn't going to be able to answer the question that you have. And so when questions and topics are highly personal, I can't imagine there's going to be any epiphanies for any individual when it comes to coaching and support coming out of AI. I think it's going to be formulaic and ultimately not useful. I think that the kinds of things that are going to be useful from a coaching and support standpoint are so highly personal. You've got to get to the root of somebody's experience and motivation, and get beyond the data that somebody can serve up to get to the truth. And that's where I think a fellow like Jay Shetty is going to have much more success
Yeah.
than any algorithm.
In the personals business, we should be a little bit more personal, it seems.
Yeah, yeah. No, I look like I said, the AI from an algorithm standpoint, sure, that could be interesting. Ultimately, the issue with most of the dating apps today is they're swiping apps. Who you get presented and when. AI could help refine that a little bit, but it doesn't solve the core problem of there are a lot of people that should be connecting and meeting in person who don't end up connecting or meeting in person, and that's where the apps are truly failing.
Yeah, serendipity, the automation of serendipity. Well, I think maybe transfer to Dan up. I really appreciate your time. Jim, this has been a really interesting session. I'd love to, this is an interesting format. Do you like this format?
The format's great, and actually, I love the format with Dan. He's so fascinating. I could just listen to him read the phone book because he's just a fascinating guy. I learned a ton. So, but this format of what's happening in the news, it's fascinating. The core challenges of this industry and this category have been there since day one, and they continue today. And there's a lot of things that are rolling out, these news stories that are picked up that are interesting, but they're not really going after the core issues, and I don't think a lot of them are going to be super effective at unlocking inspired, fresh ideas. And there's so many possibilities. The thing I love most is that Forbes piece, right? I think that's just genius.
Yeah,
Somebody's got to do this.
Opportunity there. I had the same reaction. Like you hear that originally, it's like, really, really, okay, yeah. Actually, that could fly if it was properly executed. If they have the right biz dev team push to it, that could be, because it's not so much. It's the ratification. It's like that tip of the hat. If you've got a particular app that's getting credit, and we know, I mean, this is something that Match has got to be considering. So Match has always been very good with distribution deals, locking them up as well. So it's essentially the ultimate distribution deal,
It's and it's like, imagine you flip for a large company in any area. And there's a lot of companies in some of the smaller markets that just happens to be where they've got a plant or one of their corporate satellite offices. And it's those markets that even for Match Match doesn't have enough profiles in a lot of the smaller DMAs. And so I say Match Group broadly, like even Tinder, you're going to run out of people to discover in smaller towns like Boise, Idaho, for example. So but companies, like, you flip a switch and you're just going to light up the possibilities. And I just think it's a very clever idea. There'll be some innovative companies that do that, and Match would be a natural, but I hope there be one of the entrepreneurs in this group that is able to get there first, because I like to see competition, and I like to see the entrepreneurs be successful against the Goliath.
I think we might have lit a fire today, Jim.
Good.
Excellent. Jim Safka, you're the former turnaround CEO of Match. Thank you very much for your time today. I'd love to have you back sometime soon. And great. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. It's an honor. Thank you.